Let me open us in a quick word of prayer. Father God, what an honor it is and a treat to gather with men truly from all over the country and all over, and even Australia. What an amazing thing. Certainly as tired as we are of Zoom and digital connections, Father, we have to give thanks for just this technology and the way you've provided it for us to be able to do this in a way that we can see each other, so much more connection, so much more personal. And Lord, I just ask you to bless tonight. I pray for your spirit to tenderize our hearts tonight, and that all of us may hear something new, something that provokes us, and something that prompts our heart, and may it be a poking and a prodding from your spirit tonight. And I just pray for Robert as he shares, and that he would be a great instrument, and that we do all of this for just the glory of your son's name, and that it's in his name that we pray, and it's in his name that we gather. So let us honor you. In Jesus' name, amen. Mm-hmm. All right. Sorry, a couple more people coming in. So guys, this has been my grand experiment for like the last 9 months. It's been really super surprising and life-giving. And it's really been a unique opportunity for us to gather like this. Really cool. We started it last summer after I realized that there were about 3,500 people who joined the NCS community last year who were not near a red dot, which is where we have a chapter. And I just thought, my gosh, we're just missing all these guys, and they're just floating, and we got to do something. So like God asked Moses, what's in your hand? And my answer was a Zoom account and time. And then we have access to some really cool people. So our goal with this meeting is really, I like it to sort of model what I think is the ideal methodology for an NCS meeting, and something that gives us a great opportunity to hear a message and then respond to it, interact with it. My analogy for all these things is that we roll a grenade into the room, it goes off, and then we all evaluate the shrapnel we took and why, and then maybe even help dig it out a little bit. So with that, I just think it's a cool opportunity. We don't allow any Greek interpretations or notes from your Bible. And if you say any Bible verse that was crocheted on grandma's pillow or hanging on the wall, then I kick you off. So anyway, just a cool opportunity. And I thank you guys for being here, and just a great opportunity to connect and interact. So yeah, so Kenton, I see I've got you somewhere else. Can you hear us now? Yes. Welcome to the program. Longtime listener, first time caller. You got a shout out and a gold star for Australia. So, free t-shirt in the mail. So, all right, with that, let me just introduce Robert Lewis to any of you who do not know him. Robert Lewis has been in men's ministry for coming up on 35 years, and given that he's only 42, that's remarkable. And he is an author and really focuses in on the heart of men and what's going on, and really building this idea of a band of brothers and how we address community. Robert launched Men's Fraternity many years ago, which has been something adopted by millions of people around the country. And I guess about 2 years ago, Robert, you launched a new organization that kind of encapsulates everything, that's called Betterman. And I had an opportunity to visit and meet some of the partners in this, and meet some of the people that Robert is saying, how do we join together, link arms, and do something great for the kingdom? So it's a wonderful partnership model and a model of open hand, kingdom minded stuff, which is great. Like I said, I just have really appreciated Robert and his spirit and his heart, his words, wisdom, and message. And I just think, I think like one of the things I love is he's just not full of crap. He practices what he preaches, and it's real to him, real to his heart, and something that's been laid on his life by God. And he continues to be faithful to it. So I love that about him. So just real quick, I dropped in the chat to all of you the website for Betterman. So just that way you're not maybe scrambling to get it right at the end. But if that's something you want to look at, the link is in the chat. And Robert, it's basically, is it 8 weeks or 10 weeks, Robert?
10 weeks.
10 weeks.
10 weeks.
So it's like a boot camp in pulling your head out of your rear and getting true with some of the very things Robert's going to talk about tonight. But we have actually a fairly substantial number of NCS guys that are participating in it, using it in energy groups and small groups within chapters. I think it's been an amazing opportunity during COVID, where larger meetings are sometimes impersonal, and obviously we've had tremendous impact from just being unable to meet. So I urge you to look at that and check it out. Really cool. And I just love Robert's been very open-handed and has provided a lot of tools and access to us. So very cool. I've asked Robert to share, and I love what he has planned for us tonight. And then at the end, I think we'll have about 20 or 30 minutes where we can just talk, whether it's Q&A or you want to process a little bit of the shrapnel you might have taken. Anyway, with that, my friend, Robert Lewis, we are truly honored to have you here, man. So thanks for taking the time and joining us over dinner time in Little Rock.
Yeah, that's okay. That's okay. James, it's a delight to be with you. Thank you for that introduction. I don't think I've ever been introduced as a grenade before, but I'll take that. And hopefully we'll have a good evening together. Guys, I love the fact that we're joining together from coast to coast and even down under in Australia. So welcome. And welcome into my study tonight, where I get the opportunity to kind of share some of the things that I've learned in my journey with men, as James said, over 35 years. I will say I love the fact that we have a partnership with New Canaan, and that there has been some good chemistry between us. James has been more than gracious to give us access to the New Canaan Society community, just to make them aware and you aware of what Betterman does. And we've been thrilled to be able to offer all our services at no charge, off our website to anybody who wants to use it. So feel free to take a look at that. And let's talk a little bit about manhood tonight, which is kind of my area of focus. And I thought I would start by just giving you a quick overview of my life to introduce you to me, so you can see how the manhood journey fits into it. I grew up in a small North Louisiana town by the name of Ruston, Louisiana, with my mom and dad and my two brothers. It was not a religious home, which was kind of odd in the 50s to be growing up in a small town and not going to church. Everybody went to church, but we didn't. So we were a non-churched family. My mom and dad had a difficult marriage all the time that they were together until the day they died. They struggled. My dad struggled as a World War II veteran with alcohol, and that created all kinds of tension and chaos in our family. But my dad was a good provider, but like a lot of World War II vets, was somebody who was not emotionally connected. He was more closed off. So I called him the invisible dad growing up. My brothers and I knew he was around. He was providing for us faithfully, but there was not much heart connection between myself and my dad, nor was there much life instruction. In fact, I was thinking today again, I don't think I ever heard my dad ever say to me that he loved me. Uh, he was around and he showed it in different ways, but he was pretty much just the invisible dad. So, not being connected to him, I got connected to, in my case, something good. I got connected to sports, and it was in sports where I gained approval from my friends and my coaches and those kind of things. So I just kind of went all in on sports and uh, got encouragement there. And out of that, actually got a college scholarship to play football at the University of Arkansas for the Razorbacks, and went to college. And during my college years, because of some players in that athletic dorm that I lived in, I got introduced to Jesus. And that captured my life. It was a huge game changer because I didn't have anything leading into that that would make me cynical about religion or any of that. It was just an introduction to the person of Jesus. And it was a wild leap of faith at the beginning, but I remember real briefly after coming to Christ, I had a pretty dramatic answer to prayer. And suddenly it was like my whole paradigm of life changed. I realized I wasn't alone. I realized that uh, I had forgiveness. I was excited about life. I was excited about growing in that life because for the first time, I kind of had a structure for my life that was unfolding from the scripture. And it made a huge difference during my college years. Right after I graduated from college, I married my high school sweetheart who followed me up to the university, and we took off. I forsook the business degree that I studied in at Arkansas and instead went to seminary and threw myself into seminary for 4 years. And when I finished that, moved back from Oregon to Arkansas, where we started a church back in Little Rock. And actually, our congregation was made up of some of the college friends that I made at Arkansas and some of the ball players that were actually on the team during those years. And so we started that church, and the church had some pretty exciting growth in those opening years in the 80s. And at the end of the 80s, some of my friends said, "Hey, why don't you start some study on the men of the Bible or manhood?" And we could get together in the morning and go through that together. And I think part of the reason for that in the late 80s is America was going through some pretty significant social change with the sexual revolution. And of course, the women's liberation movement was unfolding in full bloom at that point in time. And I think it created a lot of insecurity and social change among men. And so the question was coming up, well, what does it mean to be a man? And so they asked me to do a study on men. And the minute I began that study, I discovered, I really didn't know anything about manhood. And I remember I couldn't even answer the question, what is a man? And I went back to the guys in our group and I said, guys, let me ask you, what is a man? And found that the 30 guys that were in our little study, no one could raise their hand and give a compelling definition of what it meant to be a man. I mean, we use terms like being tough or courage or things like that, but to give some kind of clear definition that would be motivating to manhood, there was really nothing there. So that summer, after that year in which we had that little study, I took my Bible, spent all summer with the subject of manhood, going to the Bible, just asking the question, what is a man? And it became one of the great adventures of my life because I began to find things, not for the guys, so much for the study, but it was really more for me. I began to feed myself right out of the scripture with a foundation of manhood that I felt was really making a difference in my life. And so when fall came, we started our little manhood study up again. There were like 30 guys, but by the end of that year, we had grown from 30 to 300 men. So obviously the things that were connecting with me that I'd been learning during the summer started connecting with other guys as well. And so we went from 30 to 300. The next year we went to 600. In 4 years, we were having 14, 15, 1,600 men coming on Wednesday mornings just to talk about what it meant to be a man and how to live out this biblical manhood that I was discovering over that period of time. And then we got a publisher with Lifeway Publishing. They filmed it. It went around the country and then eventually around the world, and the rest is history. But what that led to is I've had 25 years of traveling the globe, meeting with men in all kinds of different countries. And by the way, including Australia, I spent 2 weeks in Australia doing manhood down there. But that whole journey just was a paradigm shift for me and changed my life. And one of the things I learned in that is I saw more change in men in 1 year when they could get a hold of their Christianity and their masculinity together with clarity than I saw with men who would sit in church for 30 years just listening to preaching or going to church programs. So men has become the second half of my life as a focus. I'm really retired from the church as far as full-time church ministry, but I'm full-time with men's ministry around the country. And so I thought what I would do in the next few moments is just share a few things that I've learned in the last 25 years about men, because guys, we're strong, we are tough, we are courageous, but men are also very, very fragile. That's what I've learned. We're real fragile and we can tip over real easy when things don't go our way or when we become confused. And men today, probably as never before, I thought they were confused in the 80s, but I think we are really confused here in the 21st century. And our organization, Betterman, team with the Barna Group to do a national church survey with men around the country, especially men under 40. And the results that we got back from that national study really did show that men aren't just toxic, as they oftentimes get accused of, but men are really struggling today with a masculine confusion. They don't know who they are. They don't know what they're supposed to do. They're kind of guessing at life. And there's a lot going on under the surface as they kind of proceed with a career, but it's difficult times with men. And yet in all of that, one of the things that I've just noticed, I've just cataloged, is I've seen certain elements that build a strong, satisfying manhood. And so I'm just going to mention three of those. There are really more than three, but I'm going to mention three that I've just noticed in men who, from the time that they discover this truth till the end of their days, goes all the way through life, have a certain stability and influence and self-confidence that they draw on because these things have been resolved in their life, and it makes a huge difference because it allows them to give more than receive, to become life givers rather than life absorbers or just consumers of life. They invest in others and make a huge difference. So here are just three things that I've learned, because solid manhood is built on what I call peace inside of a man on three fronts. And the first is real primal. It's that men have made peace with their fathers. I just want to stop there for a minute and let you hear that. They've made peace with their fathers. Because manhood, our sense of identity, always starts with dad. He's what I call the first hero. And it's like the scripture says in Proverbs, it says, the glory of sons is their dads. That word glory comes from a Hebrew word that really comes out of a root about being weighted. Good dads give their sons a sense of weightedness that allows them to be stable in life. And so I just think in any journey to manhood, it needs to start with dad. And if a man's not thought about his dad, he needs to go back and think about his dad and see where dad is on his radar, because it's not really possible to overstate the impact of dad on a man's life. So let me just ask you, how do you remember, or how do you think about your dad right now? I mean, he may be alive, he may not be, but when you think of your dad, do good memories immediately come to mind? Is there a sense of yeah, I love my dad, I feel close to my dad? Or is there conflicting memories or feelings in regards to your dad? Or maybe they're just bad memories. When you look back, it's something that you would not want to think about. You'd rather just put a lid on it and not think about it. Unfortunately, today, for over 40% of men today, there are no memories because they grew up without a dad even being on the premises. So because of that, we've got a real dad deficit in a large part of the masculine population today. But whatever your dad was like in your life or wasn't, you just need to know this. When you grew up, what dad did or didn't do didn't stop when you left home. Because your feelings about who you are and a sense of how you see life, your dad, even his absence, is living within you and shaping your life every day. And it's good that we get in touch with that. And men who get in touch with that are on a good journey to find a satisfying and stable manhood. Because whether it's good things or bad things, that needs to be resolved. If it's good things, there's assets you can build your life on, of course. But if there's an absence of dad, or if there's pain as you look back that you don't want to deal with, that woundedness carries with you into the present. And whether you consciously think about it or not, it's holding you back. I've seen this in men over and over in every culture. When you bring up dad, and when you get dads or men in small groups and just start talking about dads, it's amazing the stuff that starts coming out. And for men, it's amazing some of the connections they finally make in that moment to see the reason I'm doing this is because, and it goes back to dad. I mean, I look at my dad being, as I said, kind of the invisible dad. And I had a lot of anger in my life in the 20s when I was going to college and right out of college. And people would say, why are you so angry? And really, I didn't know why I was angry until I started exploring it. What I realized is that most of my life, I had been trying to live life by guessing at how to be successful, because I'd had no instruction from dad. He never showed me how to tie a tie or balance a checkbook. He never helped me with sports or anything like that. I was always on my own. And so I had to just suck it up and work extra hard to make it work. And it created this fury inside of myself that in some ways helped me to be a good linebacker, but it didn't help me to be very good at life. And I didn't understand it until I began to realize I just miss dad. I didn't have him there being a instructional, emotional presence in my life. And when I sit in groups with men and we start talking about dads, and guys lift their manhole cover and look down in there and they start getting in touch with the dad who may still be there or not there, they begin to get in touch with why they're the workaholic. Why they're the workaholic. Why do they work 80 hours a week, even after they've made it in a career? I mean, I had a doctor, a top neurosurgeon here in Arkansas. We were having breakfast one morning, and as we were talking after one of these talks where I brought up Dad, he sat there at breakfast and suddenly just began to weep and tell me that, you know, when he went to med school, he graduated #1, and he was hoping his dad would, man, I'm really proud of you. But instead, his dad said, when you get into Harvard Medical School. And then when he went and got his residency, he got his residency, and he got the surgical residency and was given an outstanding fellowship. But his dad wondered why he didn't have more awards. And then he had started a surgical clinic, and all his dad could ever do is talk about the goal that he hadn't met. And then his dad died. And he was sitting there and he said, you know, I was sitting there today, and that son of a bitch never once gave me any kind of encouragement, even though I'm one of the outstanding physicians in my field, and I'm noted around the country for different types of surgery that I can do. And he said, I just wanted to hear him say, I'm proud of you. And he never did it. I know a lot of guys who are alcoholics. I work a lot with the alcoholic community here in our state. And when you're sitting around with a lot of alcoholics talking about their life, a lot of times it goes back to numbing out pain that they have felt because of how they grew up and how they felt abandoned or not cared for or not loved. They never had somebody speaking into their life with warmth and encouragement that could say it in a way that was really meaningful, like only a dad can. I know a lot of guys who feel like they're victims in life. They're always blaming somebody else. And you can really see that, as I do, when I go and visit prisons and speak in front of a prison population. As I'm standing there in front of the crowd, I'll ask these guys, hey, how many of you guys had a dad in your life? And I can be in a room with 100, 200 prisoners, and rarely will I ever see more than 3 or 4 hands raised. Our prison population is a testimony to the absent or abusive dad. So a lot of life for a man goes back to dad and how it starts. And if a man finds himself a victim or a workaholic or feeling wounded or abandoned, or in my case, angry, one of the keys to being a solid man who lives a satisfying life where he feels good about himself so he can focus outwardly rather than inwardly, guys, he has to make peace with his dad. And one of the things that we do in our ministry is we encourage guys to tell their dad stories. And if there's woundedness there, or if there's gaps there, we encourage them to take a courageous step of reconciling with dad. And that may mean going back to talk to dad, finding out dad's story. A lot of men don't know their dad's story. And if they knew it, they could find out why dad treated them the way they were treated because of how they grew up as dads with a dad. So it's good to go back and try to reconcile with dad, or go back and talk to dad and hear those things, and then be able to find in that story the ability to forgive your dad, or to go back and, as I've helped a lot of men do, go back and identify what they missed from dad and go back and ask dad for that. For some guys, it may mean looking at their fathers and saying, Dad, do you love me? And asking the dad to just simply state that. And some men have never done that. And yet when the father finds the ability to say that, it's kind of like instantaneous healing and empowerment. So I just want to tell you guys, as you think about your dad, if there's some unsettledness there, it's worth probing that with some fellow friends, like in New Canaan. And if there's some action points to take, part of the courage of being a real man is to go back and make things right with dad, either by helping him make it right with you, or by you going back and asking forgiveness to him. And I will say this as well. for those of us who've grown up with a good dad, I think sometimes in life it's good to go back and do something maybe we haven't thought about, and that is having some kind of ceremony where you do something really special to honor your dad. Like the fourth commandment says, honor your father and mother. To honor your dad and extol his virtues and what he imparted into your life and things that you want him to know straight from your lips specifically is a great action point that you can do to kind of bridge maybe even a deeper bond with your dad. Because I think one of the things dads want to know is, did I do a good job with my son? And if you take a moment to make that really super special, you will incredibly bless his life. So I just tell you this first point because for there to be a solid, satisfying manhood, you need to make peace with dad. Secondly, for there to be a solid, satisfying lifetime manhood, you need to make peace with God. I won't spend a lot of time on this other than say every man goes life struggling with deep questions about God. I find that a number of men feel like they're too difficult and try to just simply bury them. But every man is haunted by these transcendent questions of whether there is a God or not, whether this life is all there is, and if there is a God, how do I know him? How do I connect with him? What happens to me when I die? Will I go to heaven? Why am I here? What's my purpose in life? I find it amazing that a lot of guys just try to brush that aside because they feel like I'll never find those answers. There are answers there, but it's best done in a community of other men asking hard questions. I mean, one of the things I love about New Canaan is bringing guys together to talk about things like this and to probe and to use relationships, warm, safe relationships to explore those questions and find what may be life-changing answers. But those were the questions that I went to college with. As I told you, I grew up unchurched, and if I hadn't had those questions answered, I can't imagine where I would be today. But when I went to college, I went primarily to do one thing, and that was play football, because that's all I knew what to do. But those opening college years, I quickly got out of control with girls, with alcohol, with partying, with falling behind in my grades, with friends and those kind of things, until one night I walked past a film room in our dormitory, and there were some guys huddled in there that I didn't know what they were doing. And I walked in and said, "What are you guys doing?" They said, "Well, we're having a Bible study." And that seemed odd to me. And I walked in, and they asked me to sit down and said, "Why don't you just join us?" And I sat down and listened. And one thing led to another. And out of that, a couple of those guys helped me connect, as I said, to Jesus. And suddenly the weight of life went off my shoulders. I didn't fully understand it because I was just a starter, but God blessed me with those relationships that nurtured that basic spiritual life and helped me answer questions. And as I told you a moment ago, I had a dramatic answer to prayer that suddenly opened to my eyes that God really was there. And that kind of catapulted me in the next 3 years I was in college to really go deep in the scriptures and in other Christian relationships that has made my life a total turnaround. I mean, I'm going on 72. And as I told James, I'm looking back at where my mom and dad were with their struggling marriage, with my dad with alcoholism, that I basically had to referee at 14 and 15 their marriage. And there was no relationship between us and the kids and those kind of things. And here I am at 72 with going on my 50th year of marriage, 50 years, where I dated my wife from her senior year in high school. So we had 6 or 7 years before we got married. I've got 4 kids who I have a close, warm, engaging relationship with, 10 grandkids. And all the successes that I've experienced professionally pale in relationship to what God has rewarded me with family and a wife that was built on that foundation that started when I walked into that film room. because real manhood, a long-term, satisfying, solid manhood begins when you make peace with God. Lastly, I would just mention, and this kind of goes to the heart of what I'm giving myself to in ministry today. I think a satisfying manhood revolves around peace with what it means to be a man. Specifically, what does it mean to be a man? That was the question I started with in the 80s when those guys asked me to do the Bible study. I still find it amazing that you can ask men anywhere, can you tell me what it means to be a man? Can you give me a simple, compelling definition that you feel like is helping guide your life, kind of as a masculine compass? And I find that most men, even now, cannot answer the question, what is a man? I mean, I can go, as I did the other night, to my grandson's lacrosse game, and you can have a dad screaming at his son, man up, man up. And I wonder, does he even know what man up means? I mean, if I went over and said, what do you mean by man up? Other than be tough, he probably has no real definition, vision he can impart to his son to call him towards a long-term specific manhood that his son can live out. It says in Proverbs, without a vision, the people are out of control. And I've learned without a compelling, specific manhood vision, men get out of control because there's nothing that allows them to focus. And so here we are today, and you basically got three options when it comes to manhood. You can make it up for yourself. You can guess at it, which is what I think most men do. They just feel like, I'm just going to make up my definition of manhood. Or secondly, they can look to culture, as we tend to do as well, and say, what does culture say a man is? And of course, that usually revolves around, possessions or career or power or looks or whatever that only a few men can actually succeed in, and the rest of us are losers. Or you can ask the question, is there any spiritual, transcendent wisdom that we've been given that define manhood, as in the scripture? And that's where I went back in the late 80s. And of course, it's amazing that when I went to the Bible, right at the very opening of the Bible in Genesis, as God launches the first man, he basically gives the outline of what it means to be a man. And that's part of what Men's Fraternity and Betterman was all about. It was giving men a transferable definition that they could live out and transfer to their sons. And I'm not going to spend time going through all of it. I'll just simply give you just a summary of what it says in Genesis. But when God's interacting with the first man, kind of laying out the spec sheet of his masculinity, basically tells Adam, here are 4 things that you can do to be the man I created you to be. And what I like about that in Genesis is he's given it to Adam, but in giving it to Adam, he's giving it to all men for all time. It's a timeless manhood. And basically it's around these 4 anchors. 1, a real man is someone who believes God and courageously follows his word. Because manhood is something that is spelled out in instruction. And if you live it out, if you live that instruction out, and it'll take courage to do that, that's what manhood starts with, is believing God and courageously following his word. Secondly, a real man loves and protects the woman that God gives him. And I find it interesting in the 21st century, what women cry out most for is to be respected by a man and protected by a man. Hashtag me too. And yet from the very beginning of Genesis, God called a man to love and protect a woman, the woman that he gave the man. Third thing is, a real man in Genesis was a man who was supposed to excel in the work that God gave him to do. Because work from the very beginning, even before the fall, was a sacred vocation, a calling. Work was not something as a result of the fall. Work was a sacred calling before the fall. And Adam was given a work to do that would ultimately grow into subduing, if he lived it out, the whole earth. But today, any work that a man has that's legitimate is a calling from God. And we're to excel at that work as men, because a real man excels at the work God's called him to do. And then lastly, a real man betters God's world through raising and launching out healthy children into the next generation. As Genesis says, be fruitful and multiply and subdue the earth. And so a real man lives by those kind of 4 points on his masculine compass: courageously following God's word, loving God's woman, excelling at God's work, and bettering God's world through children. Those, to me, are the parameters of real manhood. And a real man who lives a satisfying manhood will make peace with that Genesis definition of manhood. So I'm going to stop there by just simply saying this: a solid, satisfying manhood that I wanted to come and bring you guys tonight to think about would be that you need to make peace with Dad. You need to make peace with God. And you need to make peace with your manhood. Okay, James, I'll turn it back to you. Need to turn your mic on.
How about that? The host that's like classic. Well, I have a full page of notes, and this is even after I've talked to you a ton. So you didn't disappoint. Real quick, let me just ask this. Robert just brought something up. And for those of you who are not on video, if you just want to drop it in the chat or a private message to me, but I'm curious to know how many men on this call heard their dad say, "I love you," or "I'm proud of you," less than 5 times. Just, yeah, gosh. First of all, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
How many of you have never,
But my dad wasn't big on saying "I love you," but he sure showed it in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
So I have to raise my hand and say, I can't remember if my dad told me 5 times or more, "I love you," but he sure showed it a lot of ways, because he paid a lot of attention to me when I was young, taught me how to swim, taught me how to camp, taught me how to do all kinds of things as a young man. And he wasn't perfect by any means, but I knew he loved me. There was never any question.
I agree with that.
Yeah, well, you're a blessed man.
how many of the guys that raised their hands never heard their dad ever say, "I love you and I'm proud of you"?
Well, those are 2 questions. So I heard my dad say he was proud of me a lot, but as I think about it, he passed away 12 years ago. But I don't remember him ever saying "I love you." I mean, my mom certainly, but I don't ever remember my dad saying it.
My experience is, I think, and Robert, you hit the nail on the head when you said that we didn't spend any time learning what his relationship was with his dad.
Yeah.
Because I think my dad's relationship with me was formed out of the relationship he had with his dad. He was an only child of Danish immigrants. They came to Fresno in the early 1900s. His dad was a blacksmith, and blacksmiths kind of lost their way. They weren't needed that much anymore as we rose into the industrial. So there was a tough household that he grew up in, and he wasn't equipped to equip me. But I can tell you that when I was, I'm in recovery, and it was in a meeting of recovery that I was expressing to a group of men how I didn't have words for my son, who was 20 years old, and he was, across the country at college playing a sport and not getting much playing time. And he was calling me every Saturday after the games, and I didn't know what to say to him. And another man came up to me, and I still get chills every time I hear this. He says, all he wants to hear from you is that you love him and you're proud of him.
Yeah.
And that was a Thursday night.
Yeah.
And the next Saturday, my son called me. I was at the driving range hitting golf balls, and the phone rang. And it was my son, and it was a very similar phone call. And I said, I love you and I'm proud of you. And there was a silence on the other end of the phone. And it sounded like it was eternity. And then I heard this little boy say, thanks.
Yeah.
Mm.
And he and I talk to each other now at least 3 times a week. He's now 34 years old. And every phone call we end with, I love you and I'm proud of you. And he says, I love you too, Dad.
Yeah.
And I know that his son is going to be here. He hears his dad tell him that he loves him.
Yeah.
And it's just like, it was like, wow, how did I miss this? I almost missed it.
Yeah.
I almost missed it.
Yeah.
So thanks for your message, Robert. It was beautiful.
Well, Bill, thanks for sharing that and taking that step, because once you break that dam of sharing those kind of words like that, they do go to the next generation.
Yeah, totally agree. Robert, I loved your idea of kind of the reverse blessing or the reverse rite of passage ceremony, and just like never even thought of that. And that's really incredible. I will say this, guys, like obviously I talk to a lot of men and I pay attention to what a lot of men are talking about. And I think, we need to avoid the thinking that this is some sort of psychoanalysis, that, we're laying on a counselor's couch and it's like, who hurt you? Tell me about your dad, that kind of stuff. It really can't be dismissed like that. And when I'm with men, one of the questions I often ask will be to tell us the most important interaction you had with your father. And important is an intentional word because it denotes it could be good or bad. I would say most of the time, 70% of the guys will say, which dad? And I'm blown away by that. And these are guys 25 to 70. So this isn't something that we sort of graduate out of when it's like, oh, that's, way past, and I'm not trying to deal with father issues, and I'm tired of hearing about father wounds and, using that sort of overused Christian terminology, that kind of stuff. And I don't want to be psychoanalyzed, but I am amazed at what happens. I was telling Robert, and I love this analogy, but about 30 minutes right this way east of me is a giant wind farm that is just capturing these huge wind currents. And I was out there and we were shooting some video for something that I want to produce for NCS. And I was amazed that we had a drone and we were getting it up, right even with it. And I said, hey, can you fly the drone through there? And he's like, absolutely not. You have no concept of how fast those things are moving. And I also didn't realize until we got up there, I couldn't fathom how big those blades were, that they were bigger than an engine wing. And I think when I'm standing there, I'm like, I can't hear the wind and I can't see the wind, but it is creating enormous power. And I think that's such an amazing analogy for the role of the family we came from. And I think there are huge generational differences between some of your father's generation and how men were involved in the way they showed emotion or not. There are huge impacts from their family of origin, whether their dad or the culture is, was mentioned about Dutch immigrants and that kind of stuff. And just a lot of that kind of stuff was never promoted. But I think it's really important to understand how much power that windmill has in driving the daily decisions and behaviors in our lives. I think it is universal with men. And I think it's also, like Robert, you mentioned that your experience with your dad and some of the things you did not get made you a wonderful linebacker. And I think it's really important. Like when I was analyzing my own experience with my family and my dad in particular, who also grew up, you know, from a German immigrant family on a dairy farm with a father who was very harsh. My dad told me, love me every night. I just didn't know why he loved me. I didn't know what made me special. I knew I was a beloved son in the Anderson family, but I really desperately wanted to know why. Like, what value did I bring? What did he see in me? Now, that experience has made me a huge self-starter, an entrepreneurial spirit, just a go-getter, an accomplisher. And I was talking about this with a counselor, and he said, James, don't mistake the things that you benefited from, the characteristics that came out of that, from the void. Like, you need to be able to say that wasn't right, and I have a void there, and I wish for more. I wanted more. With the fact that, well, you know, don't make the excuse of like, well, you know, here's the thing. They came from this kind of family, or it was this generation, or this culture, or, you know, if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't have the qualities that have made me who I am today. I think it's really important not to excuse that away. It was one of the most profound things I heard, and I paid a lot of money to hear it. But that was profound. And
Yeah.
I think anytime you get a man to talk about his father, whether it is 25 to 75, it is one of the most common experiences where you will see a man's chin quiver. He looks like he's trying to swallow an apple, and either he sheds a tear or you can see them welling up. And I love the experience that NCS brings, that like, hey, that's safe here. That is totally what we're about. And we're especially about discovering, uncovering, unpacking, and rectifying those things that have power over our lives, those things that are driving us that we didn't realize, the observations we've never made, and that those are key to our transformation in relationships with each other and with Jesus. That is the NCS mission, is transformational and authentic friendships with each other and with Jesus. And to me, that's one of the places that is always a gold mine. Like, you never don't strike oil when asking that kind of stuff and evaluating it. And it's never trite self, psychoanalysis. It's I think it's valuable. So Robert, I love some of the things. I mean, we've talked a lot, and I know your work, and I got a ton of stuff here myself. So
what you just said though, James, that's really well said. Because I do think, forget the psychoanalysis, I think we're just human beings, and there are things that we need from each other, and there are things that we need from dad. I call it father food, that we needed to be fed, that gives us a wholesomeness about life. And when you look in the scripture, there's 7 times you see the Father speak to Jesus as a son. And it's the same phrase. Some of it, of course, is in the Gospels, and it's the same story put in a different context. But it's the exact same thing that the Father speaks to the Son. He says, "This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. Listen to him." And I take from that the formula for dads of what they need to give their sons. Not one time, but many times, because Jesus got it many times, and that is this: "This is my beloved Son." He was publicly telling Jesus, the Father was, that he loved him. And one of the things that I think dads need to do is tell their sons they love them in the presence of others, and say, "This is my boy. Let me tell you, I really love him." And get in his face and just say, "I really love you, son." And that's what the Father did for the Son. But then he said, "In whom I am well pleased." So what he was saying to Jesus is, I'm proud of you. It was a both and. I love you and I'm proud of you for how you're living your life. And Jesus, the man God, needed to hear that. And then he gives this exhortation to those around him. Everyone listened to him. And basically what he was affirming, that what Jesus did, he was good at. And so I go, that's the blessing that a dad needs to give his son throughout his life. I give it to my sons now, even though one of my sons is head of a hospital as an ER over the whole hospital situation. Another son helps run a commercial real estate company and is successful. But when I'm with them, I always say to them, Garrett, Mason, I love you. I'm proud of what you're doing. And you're really, what I've been noticing is you're really good at, and then state it specifically. That's the blessing every son needs his whole life, because Jesus needed that. And the scripture tells us that by telling us that situation 7 times between the Father and Jesus the Son.
Yeah, and Robert, I would just highlight again that I think it really is like they have to go together. Like, I love you, I'm proud of you, but here's why, what I want to encourage in you. Here are the strengths I see, the characteristics I see, the gifts and talents, and how I want to help you develop those, use them, develop the excellence in what you do, which is a virtue of God, those kind of things. I just think that component
That's right.
often is left off. And I just think, man, that's so powerful. So,
Hey, James.
Yep.
James, can I add something to that? I think that saying something is different from actually feeling it. Now, if I'm a dad, I come from a broken family, I don't know what that means. I can say I love you all I want, but I don't know what that means. So it doesn't mean much. I can say it, but it doesn't mean much. Then if I said it and I don't act like it, then my son will call me a hypocrite. Now, with that said, I think we have something really special. Like what Mr. Lewis says, the Father, the God, is an example. And for me as a Christian, I need to have a relationship with this God. And he will open my heart to what is it, that the way he loved Jesus. When that opens up, when that happened, and I said, I love you, son, it's worth something. My action will, put it this way, at that moment, my talk is the same as my walk.
well said, Hilton. Appreciate the
Thank you.
vulnerability and honesty there. And I'll just say you're not alone. And, you know, I just know so many men that are trying to figure out fatherhood, and the fatherhood they were shown, you know, over 20 years ago is so different from the fatherhood we're navigating now in this current culture. I've got daughters that are 13 and 12, and there are so many times I feel just entirely ill-equipped. And, you know, I'm looking at my wife's parents and trying to say, what did they do well that I want to emulate? I'm looking at, like, what did I learn about God and Jesus when I was going through a lot of unpacking and counseling? And how am I want to teach my daughters that, like, emphatically. And so, you know, it's a lot about, I will pursue you. So if you storm off to your room, I'll pursue you, because I don't want you to be alone. Alone is not how God treated it. I will always pursue you, as I'm not going to wait for you to cool down and come down and apologize and sit back down at the dinner table. I will pursue you. And I'm not saying this as a perfect father, but every night I just tell them as I say goodnight, I love you. I always will. That'll never change no matter what happens. And I will never go away from that. Like, I will always love you no matter what. And I'm not a perfect dad by any means, especially, Hilton, what you mentioned about the things I say needing to line up with my behaviors, or if I get short tempered or annoyed or raise my voice or any of those things. Like I set myself back, but modeling just that idea of like, hey, dad was wrong and I don't really like how that went. And I think I contributed most to that. So I love your comments there. So, guys, before we go, anybody took some shrapnel tonight that they want to kind of talk about, share those things? Hilton, I will say, if you go on to Amazon, look up Robert Lewis, you'll find a couple really good resources, and then let me know. I'll Venmo you the $15 and invest in you. So, Dr. Lawrence, I saw you had your hand, good sir.
So, oh yeah, well, I'm sorry, I got mixed up on my calendar and I just joined, but it sounded like I got in at the right moment to hear about the real big steps about being a father. I did get that, and then the response was really great. And what that reminded me of is a while back you had a program on the 5 love languages, I believe. And you know, those 5 love languages, we mostly think about that as married couples use those, but it's actually in any relationship. So those 5 love languages can be a guide for how to turn the words into actions.
It's a great promo. I appreciate it. We did do that with Gary Chapman last summer. That's available on our website or our YouTube channel. And to your point, Doc, one of the things I asked him to talk about was not just the love languages, which we all got handed if we did premarital counseling, but really about the idea of family dynamics, children dynamics, and understanding that, especially in the context of the fact that we were all stuck at home, you know, stuck in a house that ranges anywhere from 1,200 to 4,000 feet. And regardless, it's never big enough. And we were all banging off the walls and on each other. And I just said, I think this would be a great topic to talk about, not just in the relationship of marriage, but also in the context of kids, and especially ones that are home and trying to figure out life. Anybody else take some shrapnel?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment, you know, if maybe Robert could throw something in on that. You know, I've known people who've, you know, were children of divorce, and you could see how it destroys their lives. They're just so much pain they have, and resisting, you know, fighting back against that pain. They do it in a rebellious way, and they destroy their own lives, and they don't even realize it. I mean, they're so broken. And so we've got so many issues in our society today, because I think we're even beyond that at this point. We don't even know what a man is anymore. But if you could speak into like, what do you do with these poor kids who are 10, 12, 9 years old, and the father leaves, and they're basically destroying their life to get back at their parents, and they don't realize it. They are so hurt, so broken, so wounded. And there's not a lot of Christ in people's lives. And, you know, they go to public schools. You know, you're in Louisiana. That's probably a totally different world. You have no idea what it's like up there. I mean, you are ashamed to be a believer in a public school up here. You know, like, how do you reach out to the carnage that's out there? It's horrific.
John, your whole point is about the windmills, right? Like, they don't know what's driving them. They don't see even the impact they have. I mean, it just fits right into that. But Robert, take that and give us some wisdom.
Well, let me look at it from both sides. I think from the child side, as they grow up, they are going to, without some kind of mentoring of somebody, whether it's a coach, somebody at church, a friend who's got parents who could invest, they're going to live in the darkness of those forces. They just are. And that's hard to say, because when you say that, you realize the pain that those young people are going to go through for years and years. But that's even more a call to God's people, whether it's in a group like New Canaan or groups that I put together, small groups in homes or in offices or churches or whatever, to come alongside those people and be able to have this kind of dialogue that we're having tonight, to just surface that life is connected. The past is connected to the present. Those are dots, but there's a line between those dots that directly connect where I came from and how I'm feeling today. If you can do that, and when that happens in a safe discussion, that's why I like to get people together to tell their stories. I think telling stories like we're doing tonight, or getting with students or with young people, college students, and having them tell their story, it opens up all kinds of these ahas. And if they have people of even limited wisdom to help them make those connections, then it starts a journey where they can begin to find resolve, either that they create by their initiative or that others around them help them create by their wisdom. So I go from the student standpoint that you're talking about. We are raising a broken generation, and it's just going to require more of God's people to invest. On the other side, the parent side, and I've seen this a lot when parents get in touch with the damage that they've done to their kids through divorce. And I'll use that as an illustration because I've had a lot of speaking engagements and conferences where afterwards men will come up to me with tears in their eyes saying how they've blown it, they've hurt their children, they're alienated from their son or daughter because they walked out when they were 13 or 15, and it created all this animosity. And one of the things that I have seen works, because a child, this is what I've learned, no matter how old the child is, they're always wanting to reconcile with dad, no matter how much hurt is done. I see this a lot with prisoners I work with. But what I ask them to do, the parent, is to own the damage that they've done and make an appointment with that son or daughter and go back, and without giving a story of how that ends up a big, long, extended excuse, they just simply say to, as I had one guy do just recently, to go back to a daughter who he hadn't talked to in years and simply sit down and say, honey, I am sorry that I divorced your mom. I was wrong. Will you forgive me? With no other attachments to that to try to soften the sin. And what's amazing when dads own up to the damage they've done without trying to excuse it, how much it opens a highway to the heart of the child to forgive dad and to want to reconcile and to begin a journey together. It might take a number of meetings to get there and interactions, but dad owning his sin is the way to find reconciliation. So that's how I would do it. And I've seen that work a number of times. In fact, I had a dad, this was years ago, who his son didn't want to have much to do with him. And his son was finishing up his residency at Harvard Medical School. And he was telling me how his son hadn't talked to him and those kind of things. And I just asked this man, I said, would you be willing to go get on a plane today and fly up, tell your son you're in town, take him out to dinner tonight, and apologize to him and tell him that you love him and that you're proud of him and that you want a relationship? And that guy did that. And about a week later, I saw him and he said, I did it. My son received me. He listened. He was glad that I did it. But he said what was really the joy of his life was when he got home and walked in, and his wife said that the son had called her after that dinner and said, Mom, Dad, I know you know Dad flew up to talk to me. And the mom said, well, how did it go? And the son said to the mom, Mom, it was the finest day of my life.
Oh. Wow.
This day of my life, because dad owned up and reached out and apologized. I think we can bring about those kind of stories, but this generation needs coaching. The young need coaching how to move towards parents, especially dad, and dads need coaching of how to own up to the brokenness of life and move towards their children that they're alienated from.
Wow. Amazing. King, I see you've got your hand up there.
Yeah, my question is pretty simple that so I heard solid satisfying manhood comes from making peace with dad, making peace with God, and making peace with my understanding of manhood. But I just want to ask about the order. So first start off with dad and God and self. So I'm wondering, is there any reason behind making the order specifically? So
Yeah, I don't think there is an order. I gave it that way because that's kind of how it moved in my life. But I think you could come to Jesus and get your life together, and then that would lead to reconciling with dad and manhood. You could start with your manhood and somebody help you kind of get your feet on the ground, that leads to Jesus, and then that leads to, reconciling with your kids or whatever. It could go different ways. I don't want to put ever a formula on God. All I know is when I look at men long term, and I'm thinking big picture perspective, there are a lot of other things that I could have mentioned today. But one of the things I see is those elements when a guy is really becoming a difference maker in others' lives, he usually does so out of the peace that he has with himself and his manhood, with his God and his eternity. And then along with that, with the idea that he's moving forward, with his dad. And so if those things are in place, that's a guy he's gonna make some good waves in people's lives.
Well said. So guys, I'll just say, like, as we've talked about this, and I do another meeting where we just use my Audible account and we just listen to a chapter. We've been going through What's So Amazing About Grace by Philip Yancey. And there is just huge, very broad context for that. And I'm amazed at what guys will process out of that, 20 minutes of listening. And I'll just say some of the most powerful things I've heard in the lives of men is when they go back. So it's never too late. And to Robert's point, it's never too late to kind of lower the drawbridge and say to a son or daughter, look, you're, in your 20s, or you're married now, or you have your own kids. And to just say, as I look back, there's some things I wish I'd have done different and some things that I wish I'd done better and I didn't know, but I want to just acknowledge them and give you a chance to speak about it. And, something like, I'm sorry I divorced your mother, I'm sorry I left, or I'm sorry, whatever. I think you can always say, I want this to be a safe place and a safe thing for us to discuss. The drawbridge is down. Nothing's off the table for discussion. And I just want to say you can always ask me anything. And specifically, I don't know, you're a dad now. If there's anything I can do, how can I help you be a father to your kids? How can I support you, encourage you, partner with you, whatever? It's just never too late. And I'm amazed at the stories I hear. I'm amazed. I consider it one of the great joys and blessings of my job is to hear that kind of stuff. And it's remarkable, the conveyor belt of amazing steps, amazing change, amazing stories, and just the reactions and response. Like, there's just never been a story where someone just is like, you know what, Dad, screw off. And, no, like it's always either, I receive that, and I will, like, I'm not sure what to do with it yet. I'm not sure that I'm willing to let you back in, but I appreciate it and it's valuable to me. Or like, it's just like tapping a well and it just overflows with things. And so if you're a son, like, I think Robert's point of like this reverse blessing and rite of passage to your dad is remarkable. Never thought of that before. And if you're a dad with, grown children, it's never too late to go and just say, hey, how did I do? Like, in the Amazon terms, would you give me 5 stars, highly recommend, or wasn't quite lived up to what I thought, whatever, but it's a great opportunity. So guys, I cannot encourage you more to investigate Robert's work with Men's Fraternity and Betterman right now. So it's betterman.com, and it's in the chat, and it's Betterman singular, like we all want to be a better man. Really valuable, really practical, and like I said, I just love that Robert puts his money where his mouth is, and it's never him on a high horse calling out to us the orders of what we need to do. So Robert, I thank you so much. I'm so incredibly, I guess I just want to encourage you for your steady hand on the till, your long commitment to this, and your passion for this specific thing, which, dovetails perfectly with what NCS is about. For those of you who got hit with some shrapnel tonight, I hope that you will process why that burns and don't leave it there. Use this as a clarion call to acknowledge, like, man, that blew off my arm, or like that stuck in all kinds of places and it hurts like hell. I just think acknowledging that and processing that. You're always welcome here. We always have invigorating discussions on these national virtual meetings, or I just want to encourage you that another chapter, whether it's by you or whether there's not one and you want to join anyone, especially now during some of this virtual world and the ease, I'll just vouch for the fact that that's a safe place to dig into wherever that shrapnel hit you and process that. And I think the most powerful thing is you'll just hear, you are not alone. And I think we saw that tonight. Like, we're not alone in some of the voids and vacancies. We're not alone in trying to figure out how to be a dad. We're not alone in trying to figure out what to do with my grown children. We're not alone in trying to figure out those 3 steps that Robert outlined. And you are not alone. And it is the essence of NCS that when one man shares honestly his story, it always echoes into part of our lives, always. And vice versa. When you share about your experience in life, a part of that will always echo into another man's life. So, Robert, I thank you so much. Guys, I'd love to just close with a verse that has gotten me through a lot. And I want to just sort of use it to pray over us and for us to hear it as a promise. And it comes from Isaiah 42:16. And here's what it says. I will lead the blind by ways they have not known. Along unfamiliar paths, I will guide them. I will turn darkness into light before them, and I will make the rough places smooth. These are the things I will do for them, because I am their God, and I will not forsake them. So Isaiah 42:16, that thing really should be tattooed on my arm, but that is a promise, and that is it's hope, because we all need darkness turned into light. We all need rough places smooth, and we are all, especially right now, walking along unfamiliar paths and need guidance. So anyway, guys, I thank you so much for joining us. And in the email that you got, you'll see there are 3 of these virtual meetings a month that I host. They are always life-giving. I started as a an experiment, and I thought it might be me and one or two guys, who knows? And it's never disappointed. And whenever I go home, my wife's like, how was it? I'm like, it was surprising and life-giving and inspiring. And so that all comes from you and your willingness to engage. So I encourage you to continue the journey through Betterman, through NCS, or just through processing this with a son or a daughter, with your father, with your wife, or especially just processing it with God, as Robert pointed out in point number 3. So anyway, guys, go with that blessing, Isaiah 42:16, a promise of hope and a promise of God's closeness to us. And may that be something that guides us all in whatever journey this highlighted for you tonight. So, Robert, thank you. Fantastic evening, and very inspiring and valuable. So
It was an honor to be with you. Thank you for sharing ministry together. I'm just so pleased, and it was great to be with these gentlemen tonight.
nice. Well, thank you. Guys, we recorded this, and it'll be up and available. So Doc, you missed most of the good stuff. And so you can go back and check that out. Send the link to anyone you want, and feel free to re-listen and take more notes, because I've run out of paper on my my legal pad here. So you did good work on me tonight, Robert. I took some shrapnel. So yes, there we go. Hokang's got some too. Anyway, guys, thanks so much, and hope to see you again on something else. And I sincerely appreciate your time to engage and be here tonight. So cheers to you all, and to all a good night.
Thanks, Robert.
Hey, thank you all. God bless.
God bless you. Thanks.